Hey guys, let's take a quick look at Lab 4- or 4.1 MacWD. It says download macwd.zip from the lab images section. There's a link to it right here in the shell. Extract the zip file, the Linux zip file, and then extract the DD image file from that BZ2 file. So you got to extract a couple different layers to get to the DD file. I'm not sure why I did that. Sorry, hope that didn't confuse too many of you. And then you're going to use FTK Imager to import, an image into FTK. And we're going to take a look at this series of partitions, which appear to be from a Mac system. And the assignment is fairly ambiguous. Take a look at this, make some screenshots, give your best analysis of it given the tools that you've got. A brief explanation of what file system each partition contains, if it contains one. If there's no file system present, it says here, then provide info on what the partition is used for. Okay, so here's the thing. This is a I'm not sure why this is in this assignment. I'm not sure why you have this assignment here in a 5-week 101 class. This should be more of something that I would assign to my 105 class when we get to the Mac, because there's going to be some pretty deep analysis on this um, particular image, and we're going to have to be pretty low level to get down into it in order to really find out what's going on. So we're not going to do that for this class. Give me 10 slides and do an overview, a top view, 30,000 foot view of this drive. Let's look at each partition. Let's see if we can make some heads or tails out of it just using what resources are out there. I'll attach a resource to an announcement for you or an email when I send out the email for this. So you should have, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, you should have a little bit of reading on Mac file systems, but it's all kind of, the game's changing anyway. Mac's not even using HFS Plus anymore. So legacy systems, everything built up through to 2017, are using HFS Plus or HFS, but now we have a new Mac file system, APFS, Apple File System, presumably is what it stands for. I don't even know. I'm not a Mac guy, and I don't do a lot of Mac forensics, and 90% of the forensics we do in the forensics world, at least in the criminal investigations world, are Windows-based. So there's not a ton of people. If you want, here's a thought for you. If you want a good SIP, do some next level Mac file system analysis and create some Windows-based tools that can extract and parse this data. You'll probably get rich because there's not a lot of tools out there that do that really well, especially since Mac is adapting and evolving. Let's take a look at FTK Imager. So here we are, FTK Imager. I've got this image open. I already opened it. If you don't know how to do that, it's pretty simple. You hit your green plus and you select image file from the source box, hit next, browse to where you've got this zip file. Now I already unzipped it. I had macwd.zip. I extracted that to macwd.bz2 or whatever it was, and then I extracted that again, and I came up with macwd. It's got 2 files in it. Yeah, BZ2. I actually extracted from BZ2 and got MacWD. So that's your raw, your DD image file. That's the one I selected to open up in FTK Imager, and this is what I got. All right, so it looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 partitions. So automatically we're going to have no less than 9 screenshots. If you're going to go in and look at these, you're going to take some screenshots of each one and make some commentary on it. I would just use the properties dialog box here in FTK Imager. Again, I'm not looking for a really in-depth look at the Mac operating system or the HFS file system, but you can identify some important things here just by clicking on the image itself, which is sort of an overview of the physical drive. It appears to be a look at the physical drive. We're looking here at 512 bytes per sector. That's not surprising. There's 201,000 sectors on the drive, and it tells us right there it's a raw DD image. I would annotate that and include that in my slideshow. Now, over here in the hex view, we're looking at sector 0 of the disk. And that's my assumption, but that's typically the way these things work. And so on the physical level, on the physical drive, there are no files listed. There are no directories listed or anything like that because it's unpartitioned space. This is just now this hex view that we're looking at. If we go over here to our slider, if we were to slide from the top all the way down to the bottom, we're actually covering every partition here, all 7 or 8 of these partitions, or what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 partitions plus the slack space, unpartitioned space out there. So that's what, when we have this highlighted, MacWD highlighted, that's what we're looking at. We're looking at everything in just raw binary. Well, okay, technically hexadecimal, but that's really what it's representing, is the binary of the disk. Okay, and so all of the data out there, if we scroll down, we just scroll through 201,600 sectors, right? That's what we're looking at. Okay, so I'm going to scroll all the way back up to the top, and I'm just going to take a look here because I'm curious what's going on a Mac hard drive. Sector 0, right? The first 512 bytes in a Windows. We looked at that in a previous video. That's our master boot record in Windows, and it's got it identifies the file system. It identifies a lot of stuff about the structure of the hard drive and the operating system. There's a lot of boot instruction in there, and then if you remember correctly, the last 64 bytes down here are our master partition table. And for a Windows system, that's how it lays out the partitions, the partition scheme on the hard drive. Not so on this Mac system, right? So we're looking at a completely foreign creature here. We don't know what it is. I'm seeing here some kind of code right there. Not sure what that is. It says ER something. Not sure what all of this is. Is it possibly a serial number for the hard drive? Maybe, don't know. I'd have to go and really dig down and do some homework, and I don't expect you to do that for this, but we're just kind of analytically looking. There's sector 0. Okay, let's scroll down and look at sector 1. Sector 1, the next 512 bytes. Okay, it's largely empty. It looks like it's mostly empty up to this point. So there's some information there. What does it say? It says PM. Okay, that's interesting. I don't know what that means, but could possibly have something to do with partition mapping. That would be my guess. And then it gives us, it just says PM right here. And then there's some information out here. Again, I don't know exactly what that's telling us. Here's the ASCII code, the hexadecimal code for the ASCII APPLE, Apple. And down here it says Apple partition map. Well, there you go. That's kind of confirming our code that this PM up here stands for partition map. And this is a great clue, Apple partition map. Huh. Okay. So this sector 1 tells us that we're now looking at the partition map for this HFS file system, or for this hard drive. Not for the HFS file system, sorry. This is the equivalent of the master partition table, which in a Windows only occupies 64 bytes of the first, or of sector 0. Now we're looking at something very different. We're looking at a completely different animal here. We're looking at a partition map for the entire hard drive, but it's broken up over the first several sectors of the drive, and it just uses the first few, looks like it's the first 89, 90. I'm just trying to get a feel for what we got here. Looks like 92 bytes. The first 92 bytes there tells us some information about the first partition, if I'm reading this right. Apple HFS Untitled 2, Apple HFS. And then there's some other data down here that doesn't translate to ASCII. Again, we've got to do some research, and I don't expect you to do that for this class. But let's compare this information in Sector 2 to what we see over here in the evidence tree. And sure enough, there is a partition called Apple HFS Untitled 2. And that's what we're seeing right here, Apple HFS Untitled 2. So our partition map looks like it's taking the sector by sector, starting at sector 0 of the hard drive, of the physical drive, and it's going through one sector at a time, and it's creating an index of all the partitions that are on the drive. Now, is this consistent from Mac to Mac to Mac? I don't have a Mac, I can't check. I would love to do a little Mac research and find out. If you've got a Mac, you might want to consider getting together with some Mac people and some Windows people and writing some scripts that can parse out this information, create a utility for forensics, and now you've got something going. Okay, and there are utilities out there like this. There are a few open source things, but could you make one better? Okay, so again, here we are. We're at sector 4, physical sector 4 on the hard drive. And by the way, FTK Imager tells you this right down here in this corner, right at the bottom of the screen. You can see it says physical sector 4, and so that would be where we're at. And sure enough, it says Apple-free right here. Okay, not sure what that is. In fact, I expected to see something more like Apple HFS Untitled 3. Because that's what we saw up here. Oh, I skipped it. My bad. So here in Sector 3, there's HFS Untitled 3, which corresponds exactly in order to, whoops, I just went to that partition. So went ahead and clicked back on the physical drive, MacWD, and we found the partition map. We found Untitled 2. There's Untitled 3. And now here's this weird Apple 3. What's this? Apple free, it says. We've got a partition here that is an unrecognized file system. Okay, so FTK Imager sees this partition and goes, don't know that. I don't know that file system. I can't parse it. I can't tell you anything about it other than it says Apple free on the partition. So interesting, very interesting. Not sure. This information here, if I had to guess, is probably the starting sector, or this is the starting sector somewhere down here. Some of these raw bytes are telling us the starting sector of that partition. Okay. So that's pretty interesting. Now, FTK Imager, for being a free utility that's usually used for Windows, does a pretty darn good job of parsing out each of these partitions. So what I would encourage you to do, look at this, on this unpartitioned space, it looks like it's telling us, oh, unpartitioned space, how funny. That's just the front of the hard drive. So there's some unpartitioned space up here at the beginning of the physical disk, which is where the partition map is, and FTK Imager just calls it unpartitioned space and creates a little virtual category down there for us. So it's actually just looking at these first few sectors that we just looked at. So for the assignment, what I'd like to see is an analytics of each of these first sectors and make sure that they correspond to the so-called or to the given partition that's out there. Go out there, take a picture of the partition, a screenshot of each partition. Tell me the sector count and the starting sector. Now, this is interesting. This may be, if you want to go above and beyond, or if you are thinking, hey, I like Macs, I like this file system stuff, and I want to do an SIP around this. Start playing around a little deeper and say, starting sector 64 for this first partition. Let's go back up to our partition map and take a look at that and see if we can find anywhere in this partition map. No, that's just the partition map. Here's where we want. Oh no, Untitled 1 is what we're looking for. Untitled 2 is the first partition. Untitled 2, see if you can find anything here that would indicate that one of these is telling us, one of these bytes is telling us that the starting sector is 64. What is the hex for 64? The hex for 64 is 40, right? I don't know if you know how to read hexadecimal, but this is the ones column. So this would be 1 times 16, or this column, the 0 column, is times 16, and then, uh, well, no, it's not. It is what it is. So if it's 0, it's the value is 0. If it's 3, the value is 3. If it's F, the value is 15. Um, And then this one is the value of the left column there, that 4, is that value times 16, because that's the 16s column. So this is the ones column, this is the 16s column. And if I'm not making any sense, then you need to learn how to read hexadecimal, or take 105, and we'll go over it in much more detail. And I'll teach you how to read hexadecimal. Not important for this class. I'm rambling at this point. Anyway, I find it very interesting that I see this B8-40. My first thought is, I want to see if that corresponds to the 64 sector, which is where, because for hex 40 is 64, I wonder if that doesn't correspond to starting sector 64. And way we might be able to test that really quickly is go back up here. Let's go to partition untitled 3. Untitled 3, and just for kick, oh no, see, no, it was a good thought, but no, that 40 is still the same for Untitled 3. I would, if my hypothesis were correct, I would say I would be looking for something that was the hex equivalent of 333 or 33,016. And so what I would do, though, is I would start poking around in this partition table, because the partition table, or the partition map as it were, has to tell the operating system where those partitions are. Okay, and so there is something out here that is an indicator of where it starts. Don't know exactly what it, look at this. That's suspicious to me. There it is. Anyway, I'm doing it again. I'm rambling again. So let's see there. That would be 8, 9, 10, 11. So that's okay. Let's go down here. F8. Oh, oh, oh. Let's go over here to our hex value interpreter. Nope, not quite. Not quite, not quite. So I'm looking for something that adds up to 33,000. Not finding it. I'd keep looking. I'm rambling. All right, take a picture of each of these and tell me something significant about the properties. Now, we're going to expand each one out and look in there. There's some really interesting stuff in there. File size, directory, and so here's don't ignore all that stuff I was talking about. I gotta go back and edit that out. Anyway, uh, see, I mean, I'm a geek at heart. I get kind of geeky about this stuff and want to dig in and find out what's going on. But you don't have to. What I would like you to do is take a look at each of these directories, and if there's any subdirectories that look interesting, take a screenshot of any directory that looks interesting, because there's stuff in here with images, JPEGs, file slack, and you don't have to take a screenshot of every file, for heaven's sake, no. But any of the major subfolders that look like maybe they've got something significant in terms of a forensic investigation, and you just kind of want to look at the properties that FTK Imager has parsed from each of these partitions. If nothing else, just the starting sector and the sector count. That's significant. And if you want to take a screenshot of each partition and tell me about the starting sector and the sector count of each partition and why that's forensically significant. In other words, do all of your sectors add up for each partition to the total number of sectors on disk? That's critical. And then because then you'll know if you've got all of the partitions accounted for or not. All right, that's all I got for you. I am going to be off the grid for the next few days, starting Thursday at noon until Friday afternoon. So I will be unavailable for questions. However, because I will be unavailable for questions, if you turn this in and I grade it on, say, um, Friday or Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon or Monday morning, and you're not happy with the grade I gave you, I'm going to provide you with some commentary. You may resubmit it, and I will grade it a second time. So, anyway, and that also goes true for assignments that are due Wednesday, like tonight at midnight. It's 10 o'clock. If you've already turned this in and you didn't watch this, and so you did it differently than my expectations are, I will grade accordingly, and then you may resubmit if you're so inclined. All right, that's all I've got for you guys. You guys are doing great. I hope everybody has a good week, and I will be back on the grid Saturday evening. So if you send me an email between now and Saturday, I'm probably not going to get to it until Saturday. Even if you text me, I may or may not get to my texts, depending on if I'm on or offline. Uh, but uh, but I will give you a little bit of allowance and extension on resubmitting work since I will be unavailable to you for 3 days. All right, guys. Good job, everybody. We'll talk soon.